Welcome to our Masters of Support interview series by TypeGenie. In Masters of Support, we interview professionals in customer service, be it managers, support agents, vendors, or even customers. We interview these experts for tips and tricks that they have discovered and are hoping to inspire and help other support pros in your work. The interview series is created by TypeGenie, a productivity tool that helps support agents respond faster to tickets. For information on TypeGenie, visit typegenie.net. Today, as our guest, we have the great pleasure of hosting service professional Rick Hill. Rick started as a technical support manager 14 years ago and is today leading a team of 40 agents from North Carolina. Maybe if you can just tell me who you are, what your role is, and where are you based?
Sure, yeah. My name is Rick, and I am based out of Raleigh, North Carolina, and my current role is overseeing technical support team. My official title is Senior Manager of Client Support, and that's who I am, and that's where I'm located and what I do.
All right, fantastic. And maybe a bit about your background. How long have you been with the current company or in the current role as well?
So I've been with the company for going on 13 years, and it's been through a couple of different acquisitions. So I started off with a company based out of Mountain View, California, and then we were acquired, and we've gone and rolled up into a bigger company. But I've been with this team for 13 years.
Got it. And it's quite a while ago already, but how did you actually get into customer service?
I actually was an end user for the application that we were using in Southern California. And based on that experience, my usage, and working with the software team, our vendor at the time, they approached me for leading their support team. I knew the application, and I took the opportunity, and that's how I was kind of catapulted into customer service / technical support.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, and probably a very, very good way to dive into the company if you know their product already that well.
That's correct.
And maybe then in terms of your typical work and so on, just to give a bit more context, what would be typical customer service requests that you or your team are dealing with on a daily basis?
Like many technical support, it's going to be a mix. Predominantly break fix, where the application is not performing as expected. Could be we deal with a lot of hardware as well. And maybe troubleshooting hardware, working with vendors. So our team really focuses on the application side, break fix. Perhaps there's a new release and there's a problem that's happening out in the field. We'll help to troubleshoot and then identify that, get that to our development teams. And there will also be a mix of really usage from the end users. They may want to understand best practices, how to set up, configure their applications, and basic Q&A type questions. So that's really going to be a mix of what we deal with day in, day out.
Got it. And it sounds like it's fairly technical. Do you actually usually have to do a fair amount of troubleshooting before you actually know how to help the customer, or are actually most situations fairly straightforward?
It's going to be a mix. So I estimate roughly 30, 40%, maybe up to 50%. That is going to be more application where we can troubleshoot more from a workflow standpoint. And then the remainder would require us to look into logs from the device, from the database, so on and so forth. So it will be a mix of more straightforward basic usage, coupled with a little deeper dive with respect to protocols, transmissions, logs, so on and so forth.
Makes sense. And I'm just curious, I know you're based in the US. Do you deal with any other languages than English ever? Do you get queries in Spanish or any other languages at all?
We do not. No, all of our customers that we work with are based in North America.
Got it. And maybe as a kind of support manager's daily week or job, what would be kind of typical things that you would do every week or every day? Like what does your average day look like usually?
So it really depends on time of year, but typically it's going to be evaluating team performance from the previous day, previous week. I personally send out a daily blog that summarizes our performance and any other pieces of information that our team should have. So that's usually how I start off my day, is just looking at some of the metrics that we really are interested in.
Yep.
And then after that, it's going to be a mix of helping guide some of the technicians. There's a lot of coaching that's involved, whether it be helping to troubleshoot. It could be helping with making decisions on whether or not cases need to be transferred or escalated, when we need to bring in product development, or if an account gets into a state where it requires a little more escalation or account management, that's where I'll jump in and help de-escalate to the point that I can any of the accounts that are maybe not feeling as supported as they should.
Got it. And any other parts in your typical day?
And then just overall evaluating based on the metrics and performance how we can improve our operations and workflows. We use Zendesk, so I'll look at Zendesk and determine if we can create some new automations or triggers to be able to help our agents so they spend less time with manual work and more time focusing in on troubleshooting the problem.
Got it. And maybe you mentioned that you are evaluating the performance basically on a daily basis. What kind of things are you especially looking at?
Yeah, for us, probably very typical to what many shops review or analyze. A first contact resolution, FCR is one. We take a look at what the inbound call volumes are, abandon rates, delays, so on and so forth. We also take a look and evaluate what our customer service, our CSAT score is, and that's really the big one for us. We are always evaluating what our CSAT is.
Yep. And
so fortunately for us, we have a really high response rate. Typically that's anywhere from 28 to 31, 32% historically,
yep.
Which is pretty high compared to the industry. And then we take a look at any of the cases that are starting to age out a bit more. We deal with more enterprise level problems. So some of these cases take a little bit longer, a lot more troubleshooting that's involved.
Got it. And then you mentioned that you spend a fair amount working with a team, coaching them and so on. And do you do that mostly kind of one-on-one coaching? Do you also do maybe some kind of group discussions or sessions where you teach something or someone else does some teaching, or what does that typically look like?
Yes. So in terms of coaching, all of that, some of it could be ad hoc where someone has a problem, they'll come in and see me and we have discussions. And that's in addition to all of the one-on-ones that are scheduled. And we use an application, I use an application that's fantastic, that I really enjoy, that helps with all of the one-on-one tracking and really some of that growth and development. So that's what I utilize, a mix of the one-on-ones plus the application that we end up using, as well as the ad hoc, hey, I've got a problem, can I come in?
Got it. And actually, I should have asked this probably earlier, but what's your team setup actually? How big is your team, and what's kind of the composition? Is it just you as a manager and a number of agents, or how does it look like?
Yeah, so we've got, overall as a team, we have probably about, maybe about 50 agents overall, maybe closer to 40, maybe about 40 agents, going off the top of my head. So, roughly anywhere from about maybe 40, low 40s, agents, and I can't remember if we're ticked up to 50. So roughly that many agents, and we have separate teams as well.
Got it.
And it's a tiered structure.
All right, makes sense. Let's see. Maybe in terms of tools, I think that's something that can be quite interesting. What kind of tools do you actually, or what does your team typically use in order to solve customer problems? What would be kind of the main go-to tools that they use?
So, as I mentioned, our ticketing platform is Zendesk. We use that, and that's where our agents really spend most of their time.
Yep.
In addition to Zendesk, Slack, we leverage Slack for team communication, and that's been huge for us. I'm sure I'm not alone with a lot of companies that use Slack, so that's fantastic.
Definitely.
In addition, we use some Atlassian products, so Confluence for a lot of our internal wikis, as well as Jira, and that's primarily going to be for our dev team. However, we get in there from a support standpoint to take a look at any of the active Jira requests or cases, tickets, and then we end up using, as I mentioned, on a day-to-day basis, it's 15.5. We use that, or I end up using that for a lot of the one-on-one tracking.
Got it. And maybe in terms of tools and using them and so on, are there any kind of things that you've actually noticed that your team has started using and it has been huge, maybe in addition to Slack, and any kind of tools or ways to use tools that you've noticed that, that was huge for our team or at least for some individual agents in the team?
Yeah, so for us, the biggest difference makers have been Slack, so that's huge from, again, a team communication standpoint.
Yep.
Outside of email, or some other solutions or products that are out there, I don't think they're as good as Slack, in my opinion.
Yep.
And Confluence has been fantastic as well, primarily to be able to track and update any of our internal wikis as our knowledge base. That's not customer facing, so that's been a really fantastic tool. And as I mentioned, 15.5 from a pure management standpoint has been fantastic.
Got it. And I'm actually a bit curious. So you mentioned that you have the internal wikis. What kind of things do you actually record there that you don't put to the customer-facing wiki? Are there any specific areas that you especially ask your team to put there instead of sharing with customers? Yes. So typically there are going to be some components or areas that our customers would not get into, the application-wise or potentially hardware on the setup. It would be overly technical for them. Most of our customers are more at the end-user level rather than being specific on the technical level. So we post more of the how-tos and usage. Internally, it's going to be deeper in terms of the technical. So that's going to be the biggest distinction on whether or not we keep it internal or external. Yep. And then also a lot of internal information, whether it might be how best to work with certain vendors, some workflows. Again, bits of information that wouldn't be relevant or pertain to any customers. Got it. And your kind of KPIs that you were tracking were at least CSAT and first-time resolution. Are there any practices or tools or setup kind of ways that you set up your team that have significantly improved or changed any of the metrics that you've seen maybe over the years? Yeah. So the biggest boost and lift that we've seen recently is through the automation, some of the additional automation triggers that we leverage through Zendesk. Yep. And as I mentioned, that's been fantastic because it allows our agents to focus more on troubleshooting some of the problems rather than administration of the case itself. So that's been really a big boost and lift for our team. So that's, I would say, as of probably the last 6 months or so, the biggest improvement that we've seen and how that's really helped aid our
technicians to get through cases, get resolution, get some solutions out there.
And can you talk a bit more about that? It sounds very interesting. What kind of automation triggers have you set up? Just some examples to understand a little bit more of what kind of things you are doing there.
Sure. So there may be situations. So some of the automations are where we may have some canned responses back out to the customers depending on specific situations.
Yep.
And what's been very helpful is that it makes the messaging very consistent, the information very accurate, and then also allows the agent to not really have to spend a lot of time of even copying and pasting information. So that's been big for certain situations. In addition, we've been able to put in automations where the system itself will go ahead and reach out to the customers, the clients, to see if they have any other questions. Our agents may feel that the case has been resolved, and we want to get that confirmation from the customer. And we understand that customers get very busy. They may have to go off and do their day-to-day work and not on the application. So that's been really helpful as well, rather than having our agents have to manage that communication, keep track of the cases. We allow Zendesk to get those automations and reminders out to the customers.
Makes sense. And is this actually something that you introduced fairly recently?
It is. The automation that I just described, probably within the last 6 months.
Yep.
Before that time, we didn't really have a need for that based on where we were, and just because we started seeing some changes with our customer base increase, we were getting more and more cases. So that's been very helpful.
Got it. And I think it's fair to talk a little bit about Zendesk also, given that you are on the platform. Have you actually used any other customer service platforms, or have you always been on Zendesk during your career?
Initially, we had our own homegrown system, which worked well enough. However, Zendesk has been the only third-party vendor that we've used, the platform that we've used.
Got it. And maybe just a quick opinion. What would you say are your favorite things and maybe also least favorite things about how Zendesk works?
So for me, Zendesk is, some of my favorites are the flexibility of the platform. So we can make on-the-fly changes, whether it be at an organizational level, how we're tracking our customers. It could be at a ticket level, how we want to track different kinds of events or issues. So we can do that very quickly on the fly. Yep. And as I noted, the automations, the power of the triggers and the automations have been fantastic. So those are the features that stand out for me. Yep. And then also the reliability. The platform itself is stable. And there have been very few issues where there was disruption on our end. So that's great. We have to have reliability. Yep. Yeah, I think those. And then one other item that I love with Zendesk is that it allows sandbox areas. So I can make some changes and implement in the sandbox before I roll out into production. So that's been big as well.
Makes sense. And
go ahead.
Are there any areas on Zendesk where you sometimes feel like things should work differently than what it's doing at the moment?
So the biggest right now, I can think of the biggest feature that's missing is round robin. So that's where I certainly wish they had round robin assignments. Again, it just makes it much easier for us to be able to automate more on the front end. So that's one big missing piece. I know they have marketplace or apps out there, but it's not native to Zendesk. So that's probably the biggest miss that I see. And that's probably the big one that I have out there. Some of the other features that they have at their enterprise level that isn't available at the other tier levels. So outside of that, some of the features in the enterprise, not at the lower levels, the round robin is probably the biggest one.
Got it. And you mentioned Zendesk Marketplace. Are you using any add-ons from there at the moment? And if so, any that you would recommend potentially to others?
Currently, we're not using any of the add-ons. We had some integrations with Harvest at one time, which worked pretty well. We stopped using Harvest primarily because before we were required, we had professional services on our team as well. So that was good for the time tracking piece of it. But since we're not using Harvest anymore, we don't have any additional marketplace apps.
Got it. And maybe coming out of the Zendesk world into the kind of more general everyday work and so on, what would you say are actually the most challenging bits about your work?
So the most challenging aspect is probably the knowledge management piece of it, the information that comes out from our product teams, from our development teams, capturing all the information and making that easily accessible and available for our agents. So while they're very good about checking our Confluence pages, the information management is probably the biggest pain point for us, just because it adds a lot more time to be able to get to the answer, and I'd much rather rely on accessibility and ease of getting the information as opposed to relying solely on someone's experience that they just happen to know the answer. And so I'm looking at some possible solutions to help solve that problem.
Makes sense. In terms of the experience part, is most of your team at the moment fairly senior, or do you have a lot of new members also who maybe just wouldn't know the information that is somewhere out there?
It's a mix. I think probably about a 50-50 split right now in terms of experienced individuals. I experienced 5+ years, and then we do have some individuals that are newer, meaning that they're probably sub 2 years.
Got it. I think compared to many customer service teams, you actually have a fairly experienced team in that sense. So that's very good. Maybe another topic I think might be quite interesting is if you are kind of thinking how to improve in your work and so on, and maybe you get some development ideas on how to do things differently in your team and so on. Are there any places that you regularly visit to learn, be it events or some news media or any other sources where you actually get kind of interesting information for your profession from?
Yeah, there is. Aside from general search, whenever I have perhaps I have an idea or want to check what other companies are doing, one of the resources that I utilize and I think is fantastic is support-driven Slack channel. So support-driven is an organization out there, and they have many support professionals, various Slack channels, tailored to Zendesk users. It could be tailored to leadership. So I think support-driven has been a great resource.
So, yeah, sounds really good. And do you also, outside of the Slack channel, do you meet often other support professionals who are not working at your company but at some other companies in similar positions? Not in person necessarily. Locally, I will meet up with some individuals to share some ideas, especially fellow Zendesk users. But outside of that, I wanted to clarify the support-driven Slack. It is an open channel, and there are users from Europe, North America, and probably other parts of the world that go in there. So it's a really good cross-section of individuals, professionals with different kinds of solutions and applications, and they present different kinds of problems. So
that's been a great resource.
Yeah, sounds definitely very good. And I know you've been in the profession already very long. If someone was more of a beginner in leading a customer service team, any kind of tips on how to get started, where to go, and so on for people who've been in the profession for a shorter amount of time than you?
Sure. So one is I would definitely recommend that they go to Support Driven. So that's, and I am not in any way associated with them, but I think that it's a fantastic resource. So I would point people there. And then outside of that, really what we do in support is pretty darn basic. I came into this company not knowing anything about technical support whatsoever, but what I did know and what I brought to the team was really to focus on the customer. So as long as individuals are really focused on that customer experience, then they can start getting the tools. And then outside of the warm and fuzzy, make the customers delighted, really identifying any of the metrics. So the metrics are going to be key as well, is to at least build the metrics, evaluate them. So whether it's FCR, it could be CSAT, NPS, whatever that might be, really hone in on a few key metrics and ensure that the team is able to hit those metrics and make adjustments accordingly.
Sounds very good. And maybe I'm starting to wrap up actually my questioning. Maybe a couple more talking about kind of life in customer service, and I'm sure you hear a lot of different stories from customers, what went wrong or what went in a funny way. What would be actually maybe the funniest, and maybe then secondly the worst customer encounter that you've had during your career? Without going to any private details, but just would be interesting to hear some stories from your years in the profession.
Yeah, I don't know that I've got necessarily a truly funny story from a customer interaction. I can say at a high level, we've had fantastic. I've had personally very fantastic customer communications where I worked with this woman, and she was having some problems with on her web or her card processing platform, and she was reaching out to me primarily because of my experience working with some of the payment gateways, and she pulled me in because her bank representative and the representative that was with the processing company, they were about ready to shut her down because of some carding activity. After a lot of back and forth and me working with the processing company directly, we were able to alleviate the situation. And I guess maybe the funny or not so funny part of that is the processing company, because it deals with PCI, proposed a solution that was inconsistent with PCI. So the funny piece of that, as one of the vendors, I actually had to remind them that that was not compliant, and just to make sure that they were on the same page, even though it was on the processing end of it. So that was interesting just because the client didn't have to have her site shut down. We were able to resolve the situation, even though it had nothing to do with our application or our process. But because of that, she was very grateful and was happy that her website could continue to process transactions.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And sounds like you sometimes have to go kind of outside of what's actually required of you, which is also great. That you can do.
Yeah, and that's really what the team here, our team, we often get that level of feedback from our customers all the time. So that's fantastic. It just goes to show when you have a great team, they can do great things.
Absolutely. Maybe one final question. So I'm going to be doing a fair amount of interviews and so on. Are there any other professionals that you think I should potentially interview, or alternatively any kind of questions that you would be actually very curious? How does another or an average customer service team do something? Any kind of thoughts where you think it would be actually interesting to hear from others about how they do customer service, manage teams and so on?
I've got some individuals in mind that might be interested, so let me reach out to them first, and if so, I'll make an introduction to you. And in terms of other questions, probably the biggest question that I want to get some answers on or see some feedback would be on how best the technical support teams, how they get leverage with customer success, and really the best ways that they are more proactive in really alleviating any potential client issues or problems, so that there doesn't even have to be a technical support case. So whether that's at a product level, working with product management teams, or it could also at least be with a lot of the self-help for customers, so they don't even have to reach out to support. So those are probably the two areas.
Yeah, that's definitely a very, very interesting one. If you can fix the problem before it even occurs, I mean, that's the best kind of service, of course.
Yeah. Oh, and then the third one would be how teams are really leveraging more of the automations or even machine learning, AI, and how they do that with any of the chatbots. So that would be another interesting really kind of responses that I'd love to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, maybe just a quick question on that. Have you actually used any automation or kind of machine learning AI chatbot type of tools, or that you are just more interested in how people are using it, so you could try it out for the first time?
Yeah, we're not using it. We actually used chat way back when early on in Zendesk, and our customers at the time just weren't as keen on using that. This was several years back. I think this is more commonplace now, and if we launch it, I think more would use it.
All right. Makes sense. Great. I think that's actually all my questions for now. Is there anything that I forgot to ask that you would want to tell to anyone who will be listening to this?
No, I can't think of any. Well, the only question is more for you in terms of what you and your company does.
Yeah, I mean, I'm of course happy to tell about that as well. My company is TypeGenie. So we are actually on the Zendesk marketplace. So we help customer service professionals write faster. So if you have used something like Gmail or predictive text on your phone, it completes sometimes sentences for you or predicts completions. We essentially bring that functionality to Zendesk because we are seeing in quite many situations there's so much repetition in customer service work that if you can complete some of the sentences, you can actually save a fair amount of time. So does that make sense?
It does, yeah, no, it does. And I did take a look at your platform, just taking a look at, or when I saw your introduction in LinkedIn. So yeah, I agree with you. Any task that can be automated to streamline will help. Just like what you said, is have the agents focus on solving the problems and not the administrative work.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, we are obviously we are kind of trying to help the customer service industry in general, and we are also very, very keen to kind of understand more and more also what are the bigger challenges that teams are facing, and hence also very keen to speak with people like yourself.
Yeah, no, well, thank you for reaching out and giving me the opportunity to chat a little bit about customer service and technical support.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Masters of Support by TypeGenie. If you like the content and want to hear more, please click on the like button, share it, and subscribe to our channel, where we keep publishing more content. And if you are working in a team that deals with Zendesk tickets and would like a 20% speed up for your team, feel free to reach out to hi@typegenie.net. Until later!